Hey everybody, welcome. If you can hear me, would you let me know in the chat box, please? Hey Melanie, Tammy, Maureen, Jessica, Noof, Carla. Hey Caitlin. Awesome. Okay, looks like we are good with audio. Let me turn the camera on. Hey, I'm excited you're here. We've got a couple of minutes before we get going. So if you've been on a webinar with me before, you know that I always love to know where in the world you are and also what grade or grades you teach. So welcome. Hey, Chantal, Lydia, Tina, Carrie in Alabama. Hey, Lisa, New Jersey. Hey, Sandy, Brendan, Virginia, welcome. Jennifer in Massachusetts, welcome. Vicki in Texas. Tiffany, I am super excited too. Hey, Nancy. Hey, Lynette. Eunice, welcome. Lori, Marissa, and Cheryl. Hey, Maria in Alberta. Let's see. Susie in California. Woo, it's going fast. Christy, welcome. Denise, Samantha, Jean, Cindy, welcome. Catherine. Let's see. Pauline, Chloe in Toronto. Welcome, Chloe. I know I'm missing people. Sorry, there's so many awesome teachers in here. Hey, Christine. Margaret in Tennessee, like me. Awesome. Teresa, dual teacher. Welcome, Teresa. Hey, Mary Beth. Hey, Melissa. You're so sweet. Welcome, Melissa. Hey, Alicia, Kristen, Laura, Jennifer, Teresa in Southern Cali, Ruby. Welcome. All right, everybody. Well, feel free to keep on typing in where you're from. Would love to see that. But we are going to go ahead and get started because it is that time. And as usual, I have a lot to share with you. And I want to try to respect your time. I'm going to try to keep this to an hour the best that I can. We may go a few minutes over, but I promise that I have my eye on the time. And I will try to keep this to an hour. So let me go ahead and share my presentation with you. Thank you, Latanya. I appreciate that. Hey, Mary, me too. All right, so you are here for Grammar Alive. Yay! I have been planning this for a long time. Super excited to get going. Thank you for spending an hour of your time with me. I appreciate that, especially weekend time. Depending on if you're in the US or Canada, it's your weekend time. I don't know. It might not be your weekend time depending if you're somewhere else, but welcome, and I appreciate you being here. A couple of housekeeping items, just little things before we really get into the content. So the chat may fill up. We have a lot of teachers here. We have almost 900, which is awesome. And I'm so glad you all are here. Unfortunately, that does cause the chat to lock up sometimes. So if you're in that position, I am so sorry. Unfortunately, there's nothing I can do, but try again later. I do get a digital record of everybody who's here. So you will still get your certificate and you'll still be entered into the giveaway at the end. I do have that digital record, but I apologize if you can't chat. If you can chat, feel free to use the chat box, ask questions, add on to what I'm saying. I will make sure to stop a few times during the presentation for questions. I do miss things, especially when there's, so many people in here, which again is great, but I will miss questions and it's not intentional at all. Like I said, I'll stop periodically. And then at the end, I will just ask you to retype any questions that I missed so I can get them all. Let's see, what else for housekeeping? Google Chrome is the browser that the software company recommends. Make sure all your other tabs are closed. Your phone's on silent, just everything that could A, cause the presentation to crash, or B, distract you is turned off, because I really want you to make the most of this experience. I've been so excited about this webinar, possibly more excited than any I have all year or for a couple of years. So I definitely want you to get everything out of it that you possibly can. So make sure you're all good to go. Should we have tech issues at any point, there should be a reconnect button on your end. You can always go back to those reminder emails that I send and rejoin if something goes wrong. I always have a backup plan on my end, so fingers crossed it's smooth sailing, but that's what you should do should something go wrong. And then hopefully everybody is able to hear okay and see everything. I'm not seeing too many issues in the chat, so hopefully we're good to go. All right, well, I think that's all the housekeeping things I wanted to mention. So let us go ahead and dive in. All right, so I feel like I know many of you. I recognize names. Thanks for coming back for some more webinars. But if you're new to me, my name is Allison. Welcome. I'm excited you're here for the first time. I am a reading specialist and I live with my husband, Jonathan, in the suburbs of Nashville, Tennessee. And before I was a reading specialist, I taught pre-K, kindergarten, first and second. And now as a reading specialist, I actually work all the way up through fifth grade. So I used to be really primary, and that's still 100% where my heart is. That's what we're focusing on today. But I have expanded what the grades that I work with. So that's what I do now, reading specialist, as I said. Jonathan and I have two little fur babies, Max and Lindsay. In my free time, I love to spend time with friends, in a book club. I love to spend time outdoors, just some, non-teaching things, as I'm sure you can relate. And also wanted to share a little bit about why I do this. The reason I do these webinars, and I also have a blog, Learning at the Primary Pond, also have a TPT store, also Learning at the Primary Pond, is because I, especially as a classroom teacher, have just found teaching to be incredibly challenging, to be honest, and really struggled with feeling overwhelmed and anxious and not, even though I had a fantastic undergraduate program and I also had a fantastic master's program, still felt under-equipped just to deal with all the things that we deal with on a daily basis. So I love blogging. I love doing these webinars and connecting with you just as a way to give back. And also, if I can help you like skip over some sort of problem or obstacle that I face, then I love to do that. So that's why I do what I do. Okay, so if you've seen me posting about this webinar, I've been incredibly excited about it. But the funny thing is that if, like, let's say 10 years ago, if you had told me, if you just come up to me or you knew me and you told me, Allison, you're going to be teaching a webinar about grammar in K2 and you're going to be so excited about it. If you told me that 10 years ago, I probably would have said something to you like, are you delusional? Or have you fallen and hit your head? I just 100% would not have believed you 10 years ago. Because to be completely honest with you, for years, I more or less ignored or glossed over some of the grammar skills that I should have been teaching. And the reason for that, it wasn't like I was intentionally trying not to do my job or intentionally not trying to, give my kids the very best. Like, my heart has always been in it, but I didn't know what grammar instruction should look like in the primary grades. And my understanding of what like grammar or grammar instruction was, like from my own education, it didn't jive with what I felt was developmentally appropriate for K2 students. And my understanding of what grammar instruction was, it turned out to be wrong. I'll tell you more about that later. But for that reason, there were things that I wasn't doing. And I don't love admitting that because these are real little kids that I was teaching. We graduate from teachers college and still don't necessarily 100% know what we're doing. But anyway, when I did teach certain skills, because it's not like I was ignoring everything, but when I would teach capitalization, for example, I would teach it in one way. I would teach it over and over again, but my kids weren't applying it to their writing. And that's why we teach stuff like that, right? So basically, if you were going to kind of like go through how my grammar instruction has changed over the years, I started out teaching a few grammar concepts here and there. Again, really not doing a good job with it because I didn't understand like how it could be appropriate in K2. And then eventually I started integrating some of my grammar instruction into my writing instruction, which is a really good thing. And we're going to talk about that, but it wasn't enough in and of itself. So then after some more time, some more research, I did eventually understand how to follow best practices, integrate grammar across my whole literacy block, and also make it fun and really appropriate for K2 students. So that's kind of been my journey in a nutshell, and my own struggles are exactly why I'm so excited about sharing this topic with you, because I hope that your experience with teaching grammar can be better for both you and your students. I feel like that's been possibly like the biggest trouble area in my literacy block, and I want to help you overcome some of those challenges that I used to struggle with. Okay, so now I would love to know a little bit more about you. When it comes to teaching grammar, so for example, like parts of speech or even, just capitalizing the beginning of a sentence or ending things with a period, all of those things, and we'll talk about some more examples. Where do you feel like you are right now? Are you A, feeling totally lost, like you don't even fully understand some of the concepts yourself? Like, do you know what an indefinite pronoun is? Or maybe do you not see how it applies to kinder or primary? Are you B, just struggling to fit it into your super busy schedule? C, looking for ideas to make sure that your instruction is actually like fun for students and gets them to remember stuff? Or D, all of the above? So let me grab the chat and see. I see a lot of D's, some C's, B's, C's. We have a good mix, but I do see a lot of, Tanya says, sorry, I changed, D, D, D. Lots of D's. Yeah. So the good news is that whether you answered A, B, C, or D, you are absolutely in the right place. We are going to address all of these things tonight. So by the end of our little class here, you're going to understand what teaching strategies work and don't work for helping K2 students learn grammar and conventions. You are also going to know how to use a 3-part approach that gets students to remember and apply their learning. So we'll kind of simplify things for you. You're going to understand how to make grammar fit into your busy schedule, because I know all of our schedules are just, packed already. Sometimes it feels like we don't have time for grammar, but we have to make time, and I will show you how. And then you're also going to walk away with some fun ideas for making grammar engaging for K2. So hopefully all of that sounds good. Everything A, B, C, or D is going to be addressed. So whether you are brand new to teaching, or maybe you're not even teaching yet, or maybe you've been teaching for 20 years, hopefully you'll walk away with something that you can put into practice into your classroom right away. So as I said, we're going to go an hour. I think we're going to probably go like a teeny bit over, but not much over, because I know some of you have to go. But I hope you can stay till the end, because at the end, I love to do giveaways. And the giveaway prize tonight is a brand new resource for grammar that will cover you for the entire school year, whether you teach kindergarten. Again, kindergarten grammar is not necessarily what you think of as grammar, but we'll talk about that. First grade, second grade. If you're a giveaway winner, you're going to get to choose one of those K first or second grade bundles. So make sure you stick around to the end. And I'm also sharing a freebie for everybody that freebie is going to have a week of kinder, first, and second grade grammar instruction. So you can kind of see like what we're talking about. That is also from my brand new Grammar Alive program. So you're going to get that and a couple of other goodies in there. So this stuff is coming, but make sure you can stick around for it. Okay, so let's kind of start big picture. Why do we teach grammar and language skills? So I think, even though maybe, I don't know, this is probably not something we think about a lot, or maybe it's obvious, maybe we're like, oh, we know this already. I think it's really important to keep these things in mind when we're talking about teaching grammar in K2 or really any grade. So we teach grammar and conventions primarily so that students can be understood by others when they write and also when they speak. So again, we're teaching this stuff so that our kids can write and speak in a way that they can be understood by others. And when our students follow the rules or conventions of English when they're writing or when they're speaking, that helps their reader or listener understand what they're saying. And following the conventions of standard English will be expected of our students in college and the workplace. We don't want them, 10, 15 years from now, 15, 20 years from now, writing emails with, mistakes all over the place. Like, even if their email has the best content in the workplace, it's just not necessarily going to be viewed well if our kids can't get to a point where they can follow the conventions of standard English. And so it's so important for us to keep this purpose in mind as we're choosing instructional activities. Our purpose, again, being kids being able to speak and write well. Our ultimate goal is not for students to fill out grammar worksheets. So we have to kind of keep in mind, like, what's our purpose here, and use that to guide the activities that we're choosing. So I kind of touched on this a little bit, but something that I get asked sometimes is grammar instruction appropriate for kindergarten? Because it's the beginning of the school year for a lot of us, and my kindergarten teacher friends might be thinking, whoa, 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 my students can't even write their names, or my students don't even know their letters yet. And my answer is yes, it is absolutely appropriate if you make it appropriate, because teaching kids how to speak and write well is important and possible at all levels, but it just looks different in kindergarten. And I promise that tonight I will show you exactly what I mean. We're going to touch on it a few times, but then I do have a detailed kindergarten example for you later on in the presentation. And also, just to make sure that we're clear on what we're talking about, here are some examples of skills that I do classify as falling, like, I'm lumping these together, kind of like the grammar and language category. These are obviously not appropriate for every grade, K2, but I just kind of put some general primary ones in here. So, this first little thing here, you might call it print concepts, which I do too, but it actually, to me, kind of falls under the category of grammar. So for my kindergarten friends, first grade teacher friends, just kids understanding what a letter is, that this is an alphabet letter, understanding what a word is, concept of word, understanding that spaces go between words, and what a sentence is. Those are print concepts, but they also, I believe, fall under grammar concepts. And my Kindergarten Grammar Alive addresses stuff like that. Other grammar skills, capitalization, so beginning of a sentence, proper nouns, punctuation at the end of a sentence, commas in a list sentence, apostrophes, identifying and using the parts of speech, nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs, using preposition words or phrases correctly, choosing correct tense for a verb, and there's more. Just wanted to give you a few examples, and again, these are not all appropriate for kindergarten, but these are just some examples of the general category that we're talking about here tonight. I know I've seen some questions in there, and I'm not reading them right now because I want us to stay on track as much as possible. I will periodically stop and pause for questions, and for sure at the end too. So I apologize if I'm missing your question, but I will make time for them later. Okay, so even though many of us work with really young students, all the stuff we've just talked about, we have to begin teaching these concepts at a level that's appropriate to our students. And they may not fully master them yet, and that's okay. Our kids are going to revisit them in future grades and strengthen their learning. There's research that shows that often kids do better when they revisit a concept multiple times versus just studying it for a really long time in one chunk, if that makes sense. If we don't start teaching these things at a foundational level, then it will be much harder for them to master standard English later on. So we are basically, even at kindergarten, we're laying a foundation for our kids to be successful in the future with their speaking and their writing. It just, it looks different than it's going to look in 5th grade or 7th grade or 10th grade. Okay, so the interesting thing about teaching grammar is that there's all these teaching strategies out there, or maybe just a handful of, old favorites or whatever, and they don't work. So let's talk about why I'm saying that and what that means and what I'm referring to. So I'm curious to know, when you were a student, how were you taught grammar? Because for me, when I was in elementary school, I remember we did daily oral language, so fixing sentences that had a bunch of mistakes in them up on the chalkboard, back in the day. And then when I got older, it was diagramming sentences. We had this musty, it was literally musty. The pages were literally yellowing. I remember this grammar book. I hated it. It was so small. I'm not going to say it was terrible, but it was kind of terrible. And I have always enjoyed writing. If you know my blog, you know that I write a lot. My grammar isn't 100% perfect all the time, but I've always enjoyed writing since I was a child. But the stuff that I was learning in school was not connected between my actual writing and the grammar lessons. I see a lot of DOLs workbooks, Schoolhouse Rock. Yep, gotta love the Schoolhouse Rock videos. I like those. Sentence diagramming. So it looks like all of you have had pretty similar experiences, or many of you have. So here are some really good quotes that discuss what I'll call traditional grammar instructional methods. And these quotes also explain why these methods don't actually work. So there have been some studies that have been done over the years. This is not new research. Look at this. This is 1963. And of course, it's been confirmed by later studies. But in the freebie, there's going to be references, so you can kind of look up and see the different books and articles that I used. But the first quote I have here is, "The study of traditional school grammar has no effect on raising the quality of student writing." So to repeat all those activities that we were kind of listing out, worksheety, sentence fixers, they don't actually improve student writing. And going back to our ultimate goal, which is for kids to speak well and to be able to write well, that's the whole reason why we're teaching them, right? So that's not good. And then the second one says, "The teaching of formal grammar has a negligible, or because it actually displaces some instruction and practice and actual composition, even a harmful effect on the improvement of writing." So that study actually goes beyond just saying it doesn't help, and it's saying that it can even hurt. So that's interesting as well. We kind of talked about these already, but sentence diagramming, common practice, maybe not necessarily at the primary level, but a sentence fixing for sure, where we give the kids a sentence with errors and then they have to fix them. These are the traditional grammar activities that these quotes and research are referring to. All right, so I kind of said that these don't work. The quotes definitely said that these don't work, but why? The reason for this is, to what I've seen anyway, is that they don't help kids make the connection between grammar skills and what they're actually writing. They're removed. They're just these bizarre, I didn't get what I was doing when I was diagramming sentences. I was just copying the example or trying to mimic it. They don't help kids see, okay, I'm diagramming a sentence, but what does that have to do with my writing? And I'll tell you a quick story that I've told a few times, but this was when I was teaching in the classroom, second graders, and I had two kids, and we're going to call them Evan and Anna. And Evan and Anna, so I had moved up. I was teaching kindergarten, then I moved up to second grade, and I was a little bit shocked to see kids making some of the same capitalization and punctuation mistakes that my kindergartners had been working on so much. So that was interesting. But Evan and Anna's writing was filled with grammatical mistakes. They weren't even capitalizing the word I. And these were second graders. Their reading was a little bit below, but they weren't functioning at a kindergarten level or anything. Their grammar, their conventions, they just were not there at all. And at the time I was teaching second, I kind of knew that the sentence fixers were not it's not to say that you can't ever do one or ever show kids how to edit. That's not the point. But they're not the way to teach grammar all the time. Those in themselves do not teach grammar. And so I knew that, and the writing program that I was using had these sentence fixers, and I skipped them. But one day I was just okay, it's not going to hurt them to do it once. I threw one up there, and the kids had done it in first grade, so they knew what this was. They were almost excited to see this sentence fixing activity. But so I saw Evan and Anna's hands just shoot right up. And I was well, this is interesting. These kids are not even capitalizing the word I. We've got all kinds of issues in their writing. Let me just see what they have to say. And so I think I called on Evan first, and he pointed out an error in the sentence. Then I fixed it. And then I called on Anna, and she also fixed an error in the sentence. And I found that so fascinating that they were able to be relatively successful with this sentence fixing activity, and yet they were not applying it to their own writing. So they were seeing mistakes in the sentence fixer, which was good. It's good to be able to edit writing, but they weren't applying that to their own writing. Another issue with the sentence fixing activities, and again, not saying never do one ever, 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 because sometimes I do. I have my kids practice editing. But if we are constantly showing them examples of poor writing, like poorly punctuated and poorly capitalized stuff, if we're showing them bad writing, well, what does good writing look like, right? We're sticking these in their brains. This is bad, but what is good? So we want to fill their minds with good examples, not just all these, incorrect examples. And we even have to be a little bit careful with those fun hands-on activities. I love assigning games and other just, fun little things for independent work for the kids to practice grammar skills. But if we are not extremely careful to pair those activities inside of instruction where kids are making the connection between grammar and good writing, then those activities are not really going to be that much better than worksheets and sentence fixing. We have to have the whole picture and getting kids to make the connections, not just, a worksheet, not just even a fun hands-on activity. They've got to make the connection to their writing and even sometimes to their speech. So we talked about what doesn't work. So we need to talk then about what does work, right? What instructional methods do work for teaching grammar and conventions? So I did some research and I have a list of best practices to share with you. Again, the references are going to be in the freebie if you're curious to do your own reading or if you need to argue something at school. So first best practice, we want to help our students notice conventions used correctly in real texts, the ones they're already reading, right? So we want to have them notice when the author uses a comma here. Why did they use the comma? We also, and I said this before with the sentence fixers, we want to fill students' minds with examples of good writing and discuss the rules that the authors followed. We want to give them something to strive for, not always just showing them incorrect stuff. We also want to talk to our kids about how a text might change if the target grammar skill was not used, grammar or conventions. So for example, even at like a kindergarten level, once they know what an exclamation point is and that you kind of yell when you read it, ask them, what if the author hadn't used an exclamation point here? Like, how would that change how we read the sentence? How would that change the meaning of the sentence? Because conventions and grammar, they hold meaning, right? They convey meaning. We also want to teach our students why writers use grammar and convention skills, because A, it helps them better understand the text they're reading, but B, it helps them make decisions in their own writing about, when they're using a punctuation mark or when they might add some adjectives, things like that. And we also really need to have our students directly apply what they're learning to their own writing. Now, not all skills, I would say many skills lend themselves to this. Occasionally, especially with like kindergarten or first grade, occasionally you're just working with oral language. So they might not be applying it to their writing yet, and that's okay. But generally speaking, with most skills, as much as we can, we want to teach them about it, but then have them use it in their own writing in some way. And I'll show you an example of that tonight. If you happen to work with students who have special needs, you might be wondering, well, what about them? Like what should I do with them? But good news, even though you may and probably will still need to use your modifications, your extra visuals, your prompting, everything we just talked about is still best practice for those students as well. Okay, I know I've missed a billion comments. Thank you, Latanya. I'm so glad this is helpful. Let me see if I can grab a question or two. Love your point, Lynn. Lynn says, I think exposure to it is the most important. I don't necessarily think we should expect them to be proficient at it. They need to focus on writing, but be aware of the grammar. Yeah, it all takes time for this process to unfold. Just trying to see if I missed any questions. Kathy, how do you find time? We are absolutely going to talk about that soon. Okay, well, I'm not seeing any questions. I did not scroll down super far, but feel free to type questions and I will grab them as I can. Rachel says, is this what the theory of mentor sentences are built on? Rachel, so I know a little bit about mentor sentences. I do have a book. I have not used them extensively myself, but I believe that yes, all of these things follow kind of the mentor sentences philosophy. It's if that's something that you use. And you'll see, I'll show you an exact example of how that can play out what you would do in just an example week to follow all of these things. Okay, so that's a perfect segue into my 3-part approach for teaching grammar in K2. This is all about taking those best practices that we just talked about and actually making it practical, because I never want to share something and then not share how to make it practical, because that's really frustrating, right? When someone's like, well, you should be doing this, but then like, how do I actually make it happen? So that's what we're going to talk about now. When I'm teaching a grammar skill or concept, and this is pretty much true of many, almost all skills, I now follow a 3-step approach where I have students explore the skill, practice it with my support, and then apply the skill. And this is, this might sound familiar because this is basically the gradual release of responsibility model, but it's used in a very specific way that's, I won't say unique, but it's very specific to grammar instruction. This 3-step approach does look a little bit different depending on what grade you teach, particularly with my kindergarten teachers. We are, though, going to go over a kindergarten-specific example. I'm just now going to talk about, so I am going to show you like what a whole week looks like, but I'm going to talk more in depth about each stage before we do that. All right, so stage 1 is explore. In the explore stage, you're familiarizing students with whatever skill you're working on, whether it's verbs or commas in a list sentence or capital letters for names. And you're doing what I like to call helping them see it in the wild. So see how the convention is used in real text and just like doing a little bit of exploration and even play, as playful as you can make it, the better. So on this slide, I have some examples of things that you might do during the explore phase. You're not, very likely not going to do them all for each skill. These are just kind of options and you can pick and choose. And actually in my Grammar Alive program, we do different things each week depending on what skill we're working on. And so that kind of thinking is done for you. But some examples of things you might do in this stage is you're going to show students examples, great grammar, good job, of the convention used in sentences and real books. So again, in the wild. You want to discuss why the convention matters and what the text would look like if it weren't used or if the convention were used incorrectly. So, back to that example of what if it didn't have an exclamation point, or even like, what if all these adjectives were not in the sentence? You can also even talk about like, well, what if the author forgot these commas? Like, how would that change things? Also in the explore stage, I like to practice with oral language as much as possible. Just kids talking and listening to sentences. Is that a question? Do you hear any verbs in that sentence? Because that's just kind of a nice place to start. I often like to have my kids find examples in the books that they're reading, again, making those connections. So like a verb hunt, for example. We might create an anchor chart as a class that we can use throughout the week and then later on. If there's a grammar theme picture book, like something about verbs or nouns, I might read it. And then as much as it relates to and is like practical, because kids are really still just exploring, we'll play independent games, or that's something they can do in centers or Daily 5 that focus on exploration and like them noticing things. The games, they're not them using the convention on their own yet. It's just more about noticing and like, again, exploration. So here are 2 quick examples. And again, we're going to go through a full week, but so like, let's say we're working on asking questions with question marks. I might show the kids 2 or 3 sentences that are questions, read them to them, read them with them, chorally, and then ask, what do they all have in common? Oh, these are all questions. Okay, well, let's like highlight the punctuation mark. And then what kinds of words do they begin with? So getting kids to notice patterns in language, right? Because our language does follow patterns. Exploration. Here's an example of a game that's really about exploration. This game, I guess, is a little bit misleading because this is from a week of Grammar Alive where the kids have already learned in previous weeks, like what is a telling sentence? It ends with a period. What is an exclamation point? What is a question mark? And in this week, they're really getting into like figuring out what sentences, what sentence gets each type of punctuation mark. So it's on a continuum. It's not like I would not give this to them as an exploration game the first time we talked about this, but in the context of this week, it was an exploration game where they would spin and they spin a topic, so like elephant, and then they spin a punctuation mark. And so then just out loud, they would say, oh, that is a big elephant. They have to make up a sentence that corresponds to their topic and their punctuation mark. So again, not exploring in the sense of like they've already known this, but in the context of that week, it was an exploration activity because it was all about oral language and some review of what we'd already talked about. All right, so that was stage 1. Stage 2 is about practice. I like to model how to write a sentence that uses the convention, whether it's an adverb or an apostrophe and a contraction, like using a contraction. I also really like to have students write sentences that use the convention. So I'm writing one and then they're writing one. Really like to have them discuss with a partner first. That helps them get started with writing. Sometimes they illustrate the sentences and they can circle or highlight the convention. So in this case, they're doing some practice, but it's a little bit isolated, right? It's a controlled atmosphere. I'm giving them some structure in how they write the sentence. It's not just like go out on your own and do this by yourself. At this stage, we'll do some of those like hands-on independent practice games. They're not yet doing stuff in their own writing at this stage. In stage 2, it's just, again, it's more than exploring. They're doing some practice, but it's still kind of in an isolated context. And again, any other type of activities that get kids practicing, but not yet in the context of their own writing. Some examples. These are both from Grammar Alive. I love punctuation mark puppets. You can use these in a variety of ways, and I did stick. These are in your freebie. The punctuation mark puppets. You can read, you give each kid all 3, and then you read a sentence, and then they hold up the correct punctuation mark. They can also do this on their own as an independent activity. If you give them sentences, you can make it self-checking. I believe in Grammar Alive it is self-checking, where I have my first graders, I believe, they have a sentence and a group leader reads the sentence, very simple sentence. Then the other kids hold up the correct punctuation mark. And then, they check it. The group leader shows them. Again, those are in your freebie. This other one here is from my 2nd grade Grammar Alive. It's an adverb independent activity. And you would definitely want to model all this and practice first. But I gave them little like cups and they have different verbs. So like speak, run. I think I had like maybe 1 or 2 other ones. And I put adverbs on craft sticks, right? And so they were reading the adverbs and they were sorting them. Can you run slowly? Can you speak slowly? Sometimes it goes with more than one, and they were talking to their group mates about this. This could be something that, maybe you do whole class, just takes a couple minutes. Maybe then they do it independently. Wherever you can kind of stick it in, you can do this type of thing. We will talk about timing more in a bit. All right, so we've gone through explore, practice, and now we're on apply. And applying is, as the name indicates, it's all about getting the kids to take what they know and use it in their writing and sometimes even just their speech. In Grammar Alive, you'll see that, with some skills, it's really just expecting them to use it in their language. So when we're at this point, and it varies how long it takes us to get to this point for a convention or a skill, I will model how I use it in a piece of writing. Now, my writing block, I have writing instruction that's separate from grammar. That's so important because writing is about so much more than grammar, and I know you know that. But at this point, I say, okay, we've been doing this grammar stuff, so, now in writing, we are going to apply it. So actually, during that separate writing block is when I do this application phase. I want to take a piece of writing that I've it might be something that I just start new that day or we've been working on previously, but I want to take something in front of the whole group and I want to show the kids how I add it to that piece of writing. And this is not a random piece of writing. It's relevant to what we've been working on. So if we've been working on all about books on animals, I take that convention and I show them how I integrate it into writing my all about book. Then after that, many times I'll ask the kids to add the convention to their own writing. Kindergarten, this is very limited. It just depends on the skill. I'll show you, an example week in a minute, and you'll see more in Grammar Alive. But generally speaking, if it's something that I can say, okay, now go to your writing and find a place where you can add an adjective, or find a place where, maybe you missed a period, just trying to get them to add it to their own writing. Eventually, we'll do some partner editing. And when I have the kids edit, I like to have them look for just one thing at a time. Not always. When we're finishing up a piece to, publish it, we need to look at multiple things. But let's say we've been working on, like apostrophes and contractions, and I know they've got some contractions in their writing. I might have them read their work to a partner and only look for the contractions. So focusing on one thing at a time, if possible. And then at that point, the convention becomes a part of their editing checklist. Now that we've explored, we've practiced, we've applied, at this point I say, okay, you're responsible for this. Now, do they 100% know this like all the time and do it perfectly? No, because this stage lasts far beyond a day or two. You will see in the example weeks and also in Grammar Alive that sometimes I'll just have you spending 1 or 2 days on this, but it really doesn't end there. Because once you've had them apply it, you're going to need to remind them next week, and you're going to need to talk about it in the future. But it's kind of like been put on the table, so to speak, whereas it may not have been on the table before, if that makes sense. Okay, so I've been talking about like looking at a week as a whole, and that's exactly what we are going to do now. So I chose a first grade example that I think, it was first grade example that can also be used with second grade. Could probably even use it with kindergarten, but like at the end of the year, not right now. So we're going to go through a first or second grade example, and then we're going to go through a kindergarten example. This comes from Grammar Alive, and just a reminder, you do have in your freebie, it's not the same example. I gave you a different one, but you have in your freebie an example of a kindergarten week, a first grade week, and a second grade week. It's like, I believe, week 3 in the program from Grammar Alive, so like beginning of the school year. But just know that it's a different week than what you're seeing here. So you will, you'll have access to another example. Okay, so again, this is our first or second grade example that we are starting with. And let's say I'm teaching my students how to write exclamations with exclamation points. Again, this can work with second, could even work with kinder at toward the end of the school year. But here's like what a week might look like. So we start with Monday. I don't know if it'll let me highlight. There we go. And on Monday, we've set aside time for a grammar lesson. We don't have to set aside time every day for a grammar lesson, but on Monday we have, because we want to introduce our students to the concept. And when we introduce it, we actually have what I call a life-size sentence. So I'll just hold up like a little card so you can see. I will have student volunteers come up and hold cards to make a sentence, and we do a little Captain exclamation point activity. So focus here on this and this right now. These are the cards. I just put them on the floor. And the first thing I do is I have 4 volunteers come up. One kid's holding the I, another kid's holding am, and the other kid's holding falling. And then we have a last kid that's holding a period, okay? And then I have another student kind of like waiting off, and the other student is wearing this headband, and it says Captain exclamation point. So we've got this sentence, it ends with a period, and I have the kids read it. I am falling. Great. But then I call in Captain exclamation point, and Captain exclamation point comes in, takes away the period, and puts in an exclamation point. And then we read the sentence again, and we talk about how it's changed. Okay? And I actually do this with 2 different sentences, same kind of Captain exclamation point theme. And then after that, I show the kids the sentences in print because I want them to see them not just like as these cards that we're doing this silly activity with, but like also as sentences. And so I show them this sheet with the example sentences, and we talk about, why are they exclamations? Why do they have an exclamation point? How does our voice sound different? Why did the author choose that? Maybe not all of those things, but some of them. So that's the grammar lesson for Monday, and that takes like 10 or 15 minutes. Then on Tuesday, and by the way, this is not something that I follow in lockstep exactly like this every single week. It depends on the convention. You'll see that if you use Grammar Alive. This is one example. But anyway, on Tuesday, we don't have a grammar lesson, but I'm reading to them and we're doing shared reading. And I've got in my mind that, okay, we're focusing on exclamation. So I might say, hey, while we're reading this, just raise your hand if you see an exclamation. And so we're looking for them in the wild, right? Kids are pointing them out, I'm pointing them out. And as independent work, if this is something I want to do, I might say, hey, can you find an example of an exclamation in the book that you're reading or in the book that you're looking at? And if you feel like your kids are ready for it and you have time and you want to integrate this into centers, this doesn't have to be something separate that you're doing, right? Tuesday is no grammar lesson. It's just as part of your reading instruction. And then in centers, if you want to do this for centers or Daily 5, you can have them write a few example sentences from their books, or maybe they found a couple of sentences that end with periods and they found a couple of sentences that end with exclamation points. They're literally just like copying from their book an example or two or three. So again, this is all fitting into what you're already doing in your literacy block. There's no grammar lesson here. On Wednesday, you do make time for a grammar lesson. And this is probably like the longest one of the week because you're actually going to model writing an exclamation, and then you have the kids write exclamations. And a way that I like to do this is I love to find just like wacky or like interesting photos on the internet. And for this, again, this is from Grammar Alive. I print this out or I have it displayed and I will model, oh, well, what is this kid thinking? Like, what are they doing? So we'll get some oral language going, and then I'll model writing an exclamation of what he might be saying. And then the kids have an opportunity to do this. I give them a different photo, which is just this kid with the gift. We talk about like what's happening in the picture. They get to talk to their partner. If I have English language learners, I might not leave it open-ended. I might give them a sentence frame. But the kids, one way or another, they write a sentence and they put it in here. So that's Wednesday. It's all about, we're now in the practice stage, right? So they're practicing this kind of in isolation with my support. On Thursday, we're still in the practice stage, but there's no grammar lesson. We can continue, like during our reading lessons, we can continue looking for exclamations. Like this is not necessarily just a one-day thing. But if you like, as independent work, the kids can do some more of this, add the exclamation sheet, because sometimes they really enjoy doing these and they want to see more, pictures and come up with more. And so if your kids are at a point where they're able to come up with exclamations on their own, I've just got a little sheet with some different images. They can work with a partner to do it, but it's basically practicing more of what they practiced on Wednesday, because sometimes it just helps. Well, I know, for a fact, over practice, over learning, really helps kids master these kinds of skills and all skills. So that was Thursday. So far we've had a grammar lesson Monday, Wednesday, and that's actually it. On Friday, though, during our writing time, I'm going to model how to add an exclamation to my writing. And this is not like some new writing project, nothing, fancy or whatever. We're working in a genre, and I show them how to add an exclamation in that genre. I model it. And so let's say that you're modeling narratives. I'm going to give an example for different genres. I might say something like, sometimes you or someone else in your story feels a strong emotion. You can write an exclamation with an exclamation point to show your reader exactly how the character is feeling. You can add that into your writing. It could even be in a speech bubble like what you practiced before. But it's not just relevant to story writing, right? Maybe you're working on informational or nonfiction. So I might say, in your informational or nonfiction writing, most of your sentences are going to end with periods. But once in a while, maybe one time in your book, maybe you want to share a fact that's so amazing with your reader, so you write an exclamation, and then I would show them how to do it. Again, what your talk sounds like and what you're doing really depends on your kids. These are general examples. Or maybe you're writing an opinion piece, and that's what you've been working on. So you say, when you're writing to share your opinion, sometimes you want to include an exclamation point when you feel so strongly about something, maybe something that you really love or something you really didn't like. And then again, you model. Okay. So also on Friday, like that kind of took a while to explain with the different genres. You would only be choosing one of those things, of course. After that, if you feel like the kids are ready, then they would add something, an exclamation in this example, to their own writing. And then with this skill, what I like to do, it's not necessarily like that day, it might be the next day. I might tell them that the exclamation point police are coming to check their work, because we talked about not overusing exclamation points. So I might do something silly and fun like that just to get them checking, in the future, maybe next week or whatever. So this is, again, just one example, right? I would also, by the way, before we move on, add this to our editing checklist. So, this is from Grammar Alive. After they've been instructed in all this and we've worked on it, then it goes on the editing checklist. I didn't add it to the editing checklist on Monday and say, okay, like now you're responsible for this. Those first few days, and it could even take more than 2 days, these are all about exploring. Even in the practice phase, like you're there for the kids as a support. You still are, of course, in the application phase, but I don't take that checklist and say, well, now you're responsible for this on Monday. That comes after all of this, right? After they've had these different stages. Now, this is, again, one example. Sometimes your weeks aren't going to go like this. Sometimes you need to spend more time in a stage. Application, sometimes you want to spend more than one day. With application, though, just be aware that on that day that you're like, okay, like let's apply it to our writing, some of your kids might not be ready. Some of your kids might do it then with your like support, but then they're not doing it on their own later on. So just know that this stage 3, it doesn't actually end here. It would be awesome if we could just do it on Fridays and be done with it forever and they'd remember it and do it on their own. But we all know that that's not how it works, right? So again, with that metaphor of putting it on the table, now this convention or skill is on the table, right? It's on the table, but it might fall off the table. We have to make sure that it stays on the table for them and follow up in, later weeks, like, oh, remember how we did this? Remember how you did that? One-on-one writing conferences, small groups, your regular writing instruction, that's all helpful there. Okay, so hopefully that first and second grade example was helpful. Now I want to do a kindergarten example. And again, if you teach first and second grade, you can still take stuff away from this. It's not necessarily this is just for kindergarten, but I wanted to talk about kind of a significantly different way of doing it for younger kids for a different skill. Okay, so the skill here, let's say we're working with our kindergartners, and the skill here is getting kids to understand and use action words or verbs. Now, what this is not is me standing up and saying, boys and girls, this is a verb. Can you say the word verb with me? Verb. I don't use the word verb unless I really feel like I need to for some reason. I just call them action words, and all I want is for us to discuss them, maybe notice some in writing, and notice how artists and illustrators draw actions too, because that's what's appropriate for kinder. So this is not necessarily what you would think of as like a traditional grammar verb lesson, but we're basically talking about verbs. So on day 1, I might act some things out. I might like jump and say like, what did I do? Or have a child, a couple kid volunteers do some actions. I might start a basic anchor chart. It's just like chart paper. This is not something that I do like straight away in the year, by the way, but I'll title it like action words, and we'll brainstorm a few. Don't have to have them come up with them all on their own, because then I like to read aloud a book, or it can be something that we just read before and we go back and revisit it. I'll read them aloud a book, or these are on YouTube, or some of them are, at least this is on YouTube for sure. This might be on YouTube. I'll read aloud one of these books, and these books all have a ton of action words in them. So the titles are I Got the Rhythm by Connie Schofield Morrison. This is Eric Carle's From Head to Toe, and this is All Through My Town by Jean Reedy, I think. So any one of those works, YouTube, fine too. But we're reading it, the kids are acting things out, like if she's tapping her toes, I have them tap their toes. And then we can also add the action words that we find to that chart. So this could be we do it in one sitting, or we could break it up into two, however much time you have. So that's our grammar lesson. I didn't put a time period there, but with kinders, we just want to stick around 10 minutes-ish. So that's it. That's basically the explore stage. But now we start to practice. And on Tuesday, for example, we don't have a grammar lesson, but during transitions, I have some verb cards and we play Simon Says. And so I might go through the verbs with them first, but then, I'll show them one. Simon says, skip in place. And then we'll skip in place. So I'll go through different cards and it's a game, right? And that only takes 5 minutes during transition times. Nothing, not a big deal. Wednesday, I don't have a grammar lesson either, but we can play charades with these verb cards. Where if you're playing whole group, like a student leader, you can secretly show them one, and then that student acts it out, and then the other kids have to guess the action word, right? So little charades. You can also do memory. This could be small group, it could be independent work where these cards in Grammar Alive, you print out 2 copies and you just play memory with them, right? Skip, skip. So the kids are practicing saying the action words, which is great for vocabulary. You can do that with, just a simple set of verb cards. So that's Wednesday. Then on Thursday, you do have a grammar lesson. And again, this is just one example, many ways to do this. You take that class anchor chart from Monday and you use it to have the kids make a class book. So you introduce the class book and maybe you've already made one page. Pardon my really, really bad drawing. This was a particularly bad one. But you have a class book of action words. You have this cover. Maybe you print it on colored paper so it's more exciting. And they get to each make a page. And you have on there, I can blank. And they each choose a verb. They can act it out. They can draw it. Whoops. They can draw a picture of it. But they're choosing verbs. They don't have to choose different ones, but they can choose from the anchor chart that you've made and maybe even add it on to throughout the week. So that's Thursday. So that takes, 15 minutes-ish, depending on how fast or slow your kids work. And then on Friday, and this is the application stage, right? This is what application looks like for kindergartners, being able to draw an action, name an action. So it's very, it's very different. But on Friday, maybe you show students examples like you did a shared piece of writing recently, or you're modeling something that day in your regular writing block. You show them examples in the context of what you're already doing. And depending on what type of writing you're doing, if you're doing story writing, well, that's great. They can practice drawing actions in their stories. They can find action words in their stories if they're writing yet. For informational books about animals, you can maybe do a little bit with showing animal actions and movements. But you're trying to, as much as you can, just show them briefly, hey, we've been talking about action words, and illustrators draw actions in their pictures, and writers, write actions in their stories. So however you can, just, again, bridging that gap, even though you're not necessarily expecting them to do miraculous things yet, because, again, this stage 3, it goes on, right? You're talking about this in the future as well. So that's an example of a kinder week. You may have noticed that in compared to the first and second grade example, the stage 1 was just one day. That's not necessarily a hard and fast rule. This is just what made the most sense to me when I was teaching this skill with my kids. So it may last 2 days or 3 days. It really just depends on what you're teaching and also what your students need. One last little note about, this whole process, regardless of what grade you're teaching, this all takes time, right? Even if you're at the upper end of our spectrum here in second, it takes time for kids to absorb these skills. They're not 100% going to master them in 1 week. That's not the intent. The purpose of a focused week, the way I have Grammar Alive set up, the purpose of a focused week is for you to really hone in on one skill and the kids to but you're talking about these things throughout the year. This is just like a focus week, right? And it takes time both during this school year and the next and the next, and they will have more time to master these things. So even if you don't see results right away, it does not mean that the learning is not taking place. All right, I think I'm going to skip questions for now, just because we are reaching the 1 hour mark and I have this giveaway and I want you to be able to stick around. So at the end, I'll ask you to just retype your questions. And thank you so much for your patience with that, because I know I really haven't done that many tonight. Before we do that giveaway in our freebie, I wanted to touch a little bit on the differences that we might notice in the way that our students speak and in the way that we're trying to get them to write, right? So not all students come to us speaking what we might call standard English. The way they conjugate their verbs might be different. They may use slang. I mean, we all use slang conversationally, right? We have to really navigate how to acknowledge and celebrate their language that they're bringing to the classroom, but also figure out how to teach them standard English and when it's appropriate to use it. So I'm just going to read this quote to you because I feel like it's really powerful. Upon entering school, those who speak languages and dialects other than standardized English are often asked to disconnect from them in favor of mastering the correct in quotations, way of speaking, rather than building on students' prior knowledge, celebrating linguistic diversity, and the wonder inherent in multiple ways of speaking. Grammar programs all too often silence home language and dialects, and in the process, they also silence children's lullabies, jokes, and family stories. When our kids come to school, their language that they've been speaking at home and with their friends, like often that's all they have. They may not even be reading and writing yet. And so we have to be careful of course, like, do we want our kids to be able to write in standard English and speak sometimes using standard English? Like, yes. We have to be really careful about how we address that, I would say. So just a few suggestions. My strong preference is to avoid telling kids that the way they speak is wrong, especially if it's an issue of dialect or home language. It actually doesn't even really help to correct kids' language. I forget what the research is on that. We want to discuss how people might speak differently to their friends and families. That's a week of Grammar Alive, is just us talking about, like, how do we speak to our friends versus how do we speak to, like, the principal? And then rather than ignoring students' dialects, if we can find examples of it in their speech and even in books, and just point out how it's different from the way we sometimes write when we're writing like an informational book that's very formal. Just not saying that one way is like the right way or the wrong way, but just that, they're different purposes for different reasons. And at the end of this presentation, if you have some really good suggestions of how to navigate this with your students, I would love to hear them. I know this can be kind of like a tricky thing to figure out, celebrating our kids, but also trying to get them, proficient in standard English. So I'm curious to hear at the end, once we're done with our giveaway, if you have any suggestions for that. All right, so speaking of the giveaway, it is giveaway time, right? We've talked about so much tonight. We've talked about what not to do when teaching grammar. We've talked about what to do instead. I shared that 3-part framework with you and those examples. And hopefully those were helpful, gave you a little bit of something to go on. But I also have something brand new for you that will help you take all of this stuff and actually like put it into practice in your classroom, because it's one thing to know how to do something. It's another to have the time to really make this happen. So this is our giveaway prize. I'm going to pull winners in a minute from my list. And again, don't worry if you can't chat, because I do have a list. The winners are going to get to choose either my kindergarten, first grade, or second grade pack. A number of people have purchased them already. So if you did and you're a winner, you just get a refund. So no worries if you already have this. But the Grammar Alive program is going to provide all the lessons and activities for teaching using that 3-part framework that I just finished talking about. It's also flexible, but you can stick it into whatever other sort of curriculum you have, but it's going to allow you to easily follow best practices for grammar instruction, but all the planning and organization is done for you. So the packs include complete detailed lesson plans. This obviously is going to way cut down on your planning time, and it also makes it easy to prep for a sub. I like having lesson plans written out with what to say and do, because even if I go off of it, if I, for example, true story, roll my ankle, am up all night, and have to hobble into school because I didn't make sub plans, it's just a lot nicer to have that. If you have to step away from the classroom, even if you don't follow it word for word, it's nice to have that to be able to hand to a sub. And like I already said, these lessons follow that explore, practice, apply approach so that you can deliver effective instruction that helps kids apply their learning to their writing and also to their speech, and hopefully wow your principal. And like I said, I do have all my references listed in the freebie that's coming to everybody, so you can always use that to back up what you're doing. Grammar Alive has a number of optional activities. A lot of activities are labeled as optional. If it's not optional, then I do recommend, doing whatever thing I suggested, but many of them are labeled as optional. And these are things that can be whole class. Maybe like you group the kids and they all do an activity at once, or maybe you just play as like a whole group, or maybe you add it to the end of your small group, or maybe it's a daily 5 or center independent activity. These are not necessarily things that are going to make your schedule more packed. They're going to fit into what you're already doing. So these are 2 kindergarten examples right here. I talked about how just the concept of a letter is relevant to grammar, right? And so at the beginning of the year, your kids might just be sorting, these are letters, these are numbers. And if you have magnetic letters, if you have magnetic numbers, that's another great thing to do, even instead of those, little paper cutouts. This is another kindergarten activity. A lot of my kids will tend to put periods at the end of a sentence or at the end of a line, just because the line of writing on the page is over. And so I want them to see that like a period goes at the end of the sentence and it may not be at the end of a line. So I have some of these little like driving sentences where I'll read the sentences to them so they know what they say. And then they take their car and they drive under it and they stop at the stop sign. Oh, why did we stop? There's a period. Are we at the end of the paper? No, but that's okay. There's a period. That means that we stop. So just kind of making concrete that concept. Of course, we want to pair this with actual, them adding periods to their writing, but this is a fun way to just get them thinking about the skills that we're talking about. These are some first grade examples. I know it looks funny to have the word angry on an ice cream cone. Ice cream does not make me angry, but this is from a shades of meaning adjectives activity where we had talked a lot about adjectives, and they learned to group adjectives that were related together. So what's another word for angry? Well, mad, furious. Think about how are they different? It's not something that you would just give to them and have them do on their own straight out of the gate. You would talk about it first and practice whole group. But that's something where they have different ice cream cones with different adjectives, and they're, stacking them and talking about shades of meaning with their partners. We did talk about the punctuation puppets the other day, and Grammar Alive talks you through different ways to use them. And then this, even just for first graders, sometimes they need a little review. You're jumping straight to use a capital letter at the beginning of a sentence, but they're like, what's a capital letter? I've forgotten this from kindergarten. So it has things that help you start at the basics where they're just using a bingo dabber and they're finding the capital letters. It has that kind of thing too. And then last but not least, here are some second grade examples. These are for contractions, magnetic letters. They're just making them. And then this is cooking up contractions. I've seen the contraction surgery so much all over Pinterest, and I think that's really cute, but I wanted something a little bit different. And so I took different pictures of fruits and vegetables and I cut them in half, and there's different ones. So there's a banana, an apple, an orange, and the kids first pair correct they match the correct fruits and vegetables together. And then they read the two words, and on this little like mixing bowl that's laminated, they like put the fruit or vegetable in there, and then they mix it up, and then they come out with the contraction that they write with an expo marker, a dry erase marker. And then this last little thing is from an adjectives activity where I would have like a paper bag and I would stick different adjectives in it, and they would read them one by one, and they would have a mystery object. So like there'd be bag number 1, and then they read all the adjectives and they're like, well, what is it? They have to guess, and then they can check their answer under the little mystery object flip thing. So again, just fun ways to practice the different skills that you might be working on. And we talked about this before, but a number of these activities can be integrated into your existing reading and writing instruction to really save you time. This is not, Grammar Live is not something where you're like, oh my gosh, I have to find like an extra 3 hours a week in my schedule. No, I know you don't have that. So I talk explicitly in the lessons about how to make this work in your existing structures that you have in your literacy block. You need to carve out, 2, occasionally 3 little lessons a week. But other than that, you can make everything work into what you're already doing. Grammar Live also has I Can posters so that you can display your learning goals if that's something you need to do. Also just to keep kids focused and give them examples throughout the week. As far as assessment goes, so for kindergarten and also for first and second, I have these little rubrics where I have the different target skills. All the kids are on one page, and then I show you how I rate them or whatever. And as you're doing these activities with kids and they're writing sentences and even adding to their writing, you're going to notice oh, we got this, or no, we don't get this. And so that's a way of just recording your, how they're doing on an ongoing basis. I grouped 5 weeks together just so you're not having to get a new one every single week. And then also, this is only for first and second grade, but the first and second grade Grammar Alive, those come with more formal assessments, and there's 3 of them, and I tell you when to use them, but you can also break them up. Now with the kids writing sentences and everything, every week in first and second grade anyway, you can assess those. So you don't even have to use these if you don't want to. But I know that sometimes in terms of getting grades, it's helpful to have something like that. So I did include the more formal assessments for first and second. So, I know there's a lot of materials out there, Pinterest, TPT, whatever else. Grammar Live is a little bit unique. One thing is that it's extremely flexible. It doesn't require a grammar lesson every day, and you can rearrange the skills to match your curriculum or your pacing guide. It's easy to do that. All the lesson plans have an editable version in case you want to make changes, in case you want to copy and paste into your own template. Printing is also really easy because I took the black and white materials and separated them out from color. So if you want to use color materials, awesome. But with the black and white PDFs, you literally just print and that's it, which is a time saver. And then this does not require you to go out and purchase a bunch of new books to match this grammar skill or do that. What you need is included. You might need dice or scissors or something like that, but you're not going to need to go out and buy a bunch of new books. I'm all about taking the books that you're already using during your reading instruction or even writing instruction and using it there. Okay, so I'm going to pull names in a second, but I do want to share this with you because Grammar Alive, should you end up not being a giveaway winner, is discounted temporarily, 25% off through Monday, September 23rd. So not tomorrow, but the following Monday. These are the prices. Kinder was reduced from 30 to 22, first and second, 44 to 33. And then I also provided a big bundle of all 3, K2, and that's 67 as compared to 89. One last thing though, I do have a bonus gift in addition to the discount. If you purchase Grammar Alive before or on September 23rd, you also get another bonus. And this is something that's going to be a product eventually by itself, but right now it's in there for you as a free gift. It's like a workbook, although it's not maybe what you would think of as a traditional workbook. You literally just print it off, staple it, make copies for your kids. It tells you what to do in there, but it's just got little places for the kids to document their learning. and maybe do a little practice. So like these are Kinder example pages where we're talking about what is a word, and they circle the ones that are words. And then they write an example of a word. So then you can go back, oh, what's a word? We can review. It's kind of like a documentation of their learning because you staple together multiple weeks. Or like later in the year, much later if we're doing plural nouns, draw a picture of bug, draw a picture of bugs. I see a log, I see logs. So again, it's really just like kind of documenting what you're working on. There's 1 page per week. First grade, they're like filling in, an adjective is a describing word. Write some adjectives, write an example sentence. Over here, it's questions, underline the example questions, write an example of a question. It's not necessarily as much of a workbook as like a place for them to document their learning and refer back to. That's really what this is designed to be about. Second grade example pages, kind of along the same lines, writing some example adjectives, a sentence with adjectives, past and present tense verbs. Today I call my friend. Yesterday I called my friend. Just little things like that to help them practice, but also document their learning. So this workbook is only going to be included in Grammar Alive because it goes along with Grammar Alive through September 23rd at midnight Eastern time. And at that time, the product discount goes away and the Grammar Alive, not Grammar Alive, but the little workbook is going to be removed from that file. All right, I'm losing my voice. Let's do our giveaway. Thanks for bearing with me as we go a little bit over time. Okay, today is Sunday. So for the giveaway, I asked that right now we just clear the chat box, because if I call your name, and only if, I'd like you to just let me know that you're here in the chat. And then also you're going to need to email me and tell me if you want me if you want the Kinder first or second version. Okay. All right, first winner is Stacy. Email is mizstac55@bex.net. Stacy, let us know if you're here. Remember, if you can't chat, just let me know that in the email. No problem. I know sometimes it locks up and is a pain in the booty. Okay, Sarah with an H, .smith3@pisd.edu. Sarah, let us know if you're here. Jimena Diaz Del Valle, it looks like, at Gmail. Jimena, let us know if you are here. Okay, a couple more. Nicole, NLANTAIGNE @hwrsd.org. Nicole, let us know if you're here. And one more, Jane with a Y, JAYNEHERION @outlook.com. Jane, let us know if you are here. Alrighty, well, winners, make sure you email me so that I know what grade level to send you. Congratulations. If you are not a winner, I still do have that discount for you. I have the whole extra free product that goes along with Grammar Live that you can get for free if you purchase by Monday, September 23rd. Just doing this to celebrate the release because this is brand new. Also want to let you know real quick before I share the freebie, I'm going to do a Facebook Live video session to show you exactly how to get set up and started with the materials, because there's nothing worse than buying something and being like, I don't know how to use this, or I'll put the link up. I don't know how to get started. I don't know what to print or how to do this. There's nothing worse than that. So I'm going to show you, even though it is very simple, I'm going to show you exactly how to get set up. I'll go over again how to use the materials. So if you would like to join me for that, I'll be doing that this Thursday at 7 p.m. Central. It's not going to be as long as this. It's going to be a shorter session. And that's going to be on my Facebook page, which is Learning at the Primary Pond. If you don't use Facebook, I will email out the video next weekend. So, don't worry if you don't use it, but you still have Grammar Live and you want to see how to get set up. But I will be doing that on my Facebook page, so I hope you can join me for that. But let me go ahead and share the freebie. So I will put the Grammar Alive link back up, but it's in my Teachers Pay Teacher store, which is Learning at the Primary Pond. Okay, let me just check and make sure I got the freebie in there. Okay, so in the freebie, what you're gonna see the references that I talked about with, the different grammar research. You're gonna see those templates for the punctuation mark puppets. I did also outline the 3-part framework, like what happens in each stage. And then you're going to have a full week. It's week 3 of the program, Grammar Live for kindergarten, week 3 of first grade Grammar Live, and then week 3 of second grade Grammar Live. So that is in your freebie. If it doesn't work for whatever reason, the download, I'm emailing it to you. I already set it up. It's going out. The freebie, certificate of attendance, and the recording, assuming this recorded, knock on wood, that's going to be emailed to you. You may want to add these 2 email addresses. I'll just stick them up here because sometimes the internet world likes to reject my messages. Webinarinfo@webinarjam.com. You should get this stuff as long as you got the reminder emails, but who knows? Here are 2 addresses. I'm going to stick them in the sticky right up here that you can add to your email provider to just like whitelist the emails to make sure that you get this stuff. Should come to you within a couple of hours. If you don't have it by tomorrow, feel free to just email me and let me know. And thank you so much. I know we went way over. Apologies. I hope it was helpful. If you have to leave us, if you have little ones to put to bed, I totally understand, but I do know that I missed a ton of questions. So I will put back up the Grammar Alive link, and then please do retype your questions because they get pushed down so far that I can't see them. But I would love to answer your questions, and I apologize that I'm just now getting to them. But I do hope this was helpful. If you have to leave us, thank you very much. And you are welcome to email me with questions. The reminder emails are automated, but you can still reply back and get to me. Okay, thank you, Michael. Laura says, do you believe in a certain order to teach grammar skills? To my knowledge, Laura, there's no one correct way, but sometimes there are things that make more sense than others. So you'll see with Grammar Alive, certain skills like the capitalization, punctuation, like basics, we talk about earlier in the year, mostly with first and second, and then we loop back and talk about them again later on. With adverbs, for example, you want to teach verbs before you teach adverbs. You can actually see in the freebie the scope and sequence of how I teach them at each level, but no, I don't believe in one best order for teaching them. Thank you, Lindsay. I'm so glad it was helpful. Ben says, should we use the random draw method where you draw names to have students answer randomly? Ben, are you just talking in general, how to call in students? Sometimes I'll do random draw. Sometimes I will intentionally, come up with questions for specific kids. Hopefully I understood that right. Christy says, do you have plans to do a writing webinar soon? So, Christy, I'm assuming you're not in my kindergarten literacy club, because if yes, the answer is yeah, we're actually doing one in October, but that's the closed kindergarten literacy club members for them. But a public live webinar, I don't have plans to do a live one. I do have a recording that I show that's all about writing workshop. And if you're interested in getting that, I will put the link up here. Let me just find it. Okay. So if you're interested in a writing workshop webinar, because again, I teach writing separate from grammar, except when we're, applying the skills. If you're interested in that, I'm putting in the chat a link. That's a recording. This is live, but that'll be a recording. I am so glad, Michelle. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Mabel. Kimberly says, thank you so much. Just purchased Grammar Alive for second grade. Woohoo! Okay, Carolyn says, I teach second grade, but I have a third grade daughter who needs to work on using conventions. How can I help her? So Carolyn, that's awesome that you want to help her. I assume that she's getting these things introduced to her it in class. And so maybe it's just a matter of applying it to her writing. I would, I guess, just encourage you to, maybe you guys go to the zoo and then at home, like she like writes about it, encourage her to write, and then just kind of, let her write, get her thoughts out, but then go over it and say, okay, I want you to look for like, punctuation at the end of your sentences. Do you have punctuation? And so then have her, read it and look only for punctuation marks. But just try to keep it as fun as you can, tied to what you're doing as a family or whatever. So that's just one thought on that. Okay, Lynn has a good question. As a grade 1 teacher in Canada, should I get the kinder or grade 1 program? And Lynn and any other Canadian teachers, generally speaking, I recommend a 1 grade level down. Lynn, if you feel like it will be beneficial, so you can actually look at the scope and sequence if you download the freebie, which again is getting emailed to you, or it's on the product page. I'll share that again. The kindergarten really starts off like, what is a letter? What is a word? Lynn, if you want to get into more, if you want to get into the stuff that's like, what is a verb? What is an adjective? If you want to get into that stuff and that's something that you do with your students, then I would recommend grade 1. Generally, I do recommend 1 grade down. It's a lot of oral language in kindergarten, punctuation basics, capitalization basics. I would just look at the like list of weekly skills that I have for you and figure out like what best matches your students' needs. And Lynn, going back to that idea of using 1 grade level down, if you teach in Canada, you may need to, if you choose the 1st grade version, only do part of it or start it a little bit later. Denise, you are so welcome. So I'm emailing that out. The certificate is going to be emailed out to you. If you don't get it by tomorrow and it's not in spam, feel free to email me for it. Thank you, Kathy. Kathy? Yep, answered your question. Awesome, Judy. I hope you love it. Karen says, how do you start laying the foundation before the age of 4 years? For me, that's just a lot of like reading aloud to kids and, engaging them in conversation, talking about pictures and books, just oral language for sure. Thank you, Sherry. That's so kind of you. I appreciate that. Laura, you are so welcome. Isabel says, do you believe this could be used for 3rd grade bilingual class? So Isabel, are your kids in a transitional bilingual where they're coming into more English and just now starting to speak a little bit more English? Because if so, then I definitely think that the 2nd grade version could work for you, unless you have a lot of like level 1 kids who might even need the 1st grade version. Thank you, Sandy. I appreciate that. Jennifer, awesome. Just purchased Grammar Alive for Kinder. I'm so glad it was helpful, and thank you so much. Lindsay, that email should be coming. I want to say I set it up for like half an hour for now. Melissa says, any suggestions for supporting students who have not previously attended school and who are placed in 1st grade because of their age? That is tough. You probably, I'm guessing, have a big range, right? So Melissa, I don't know if you mean like grammar specifically or just all the things, but small groups. Even if you sometimes need to do something with half the class, like it's a smaller group than the whole class, right? Virginia says, I have college students that come into my room twice a week. Do you think your lessons would be appropriate for them to use in small group? Yeah, I think so, Virginia. I would just make sure, and you'll see once you open it up, you would want to like highlight, because the way I did is like phase 1 or stage 1, at least for 1st and 2nd grade, is on, so like stage 1 is like 1 page, stage 2 is another page. So it's not necessarily laid out like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, even though it's very easy to arrange them that way. And I have a template for you. So anyway, Virginia, what I would say is yes, just make sure you highlight exactly like which part you want them to do. And then it's very self-explanatory. I absolutely think that could work. Oh, Sarah, you have a big class. Holy cow. Isabel, if you have some new arrivals, maybe 1st grade version, I would look at the list of skills that's in the freebie and also on the product pages and see what looks right. Kim, yes, the freebie will also be sent to you later. The free bonus product that comes in Grammar Alive is already in that file, so make sure you download it and grab it. But the freebie that goes with tonight is going to be emailed to you as well. Shani, I'm not sure if I'm saying your name correctly, but I do have a lesson for nouns. I have them in the first and second grade, also the K2 combo bundle. Thank you, Virginia. I appreciate that. Okay, just scrolling, see if I missed any other questions. Susie, I'm so glad this was helpful and you can share with your second grade team. Wonderful. Thank you, Sherry. I appreciate that. All right, well, I will let you go because we've gone an hour and a half and my voice is going, but do feel free to email me if you don't get that email with the certificate, the recording. Just reply back to one of those messages. I would love to see you on Thursday, just so, whether you're like not sure if Grammar Alive is going to work for you, or you're like, I've already got Grammar Alive, I'm ready to go, I want to see how to get started. I think either way, it'll be helpful for you. I just want to provide a little bit more guidance in using the materials. It is very self-explanatory. So if you don't watch this, there's actually an instructions video that's included in each one. So don't worry about that. But if you would like a little bit more support just to ask questions, please join me. I would love to have you with me on Thursday at 7 p.m. Central. If you do have friends that might want to see this, I am doing the same exact webinar tomorrow evening. And you're welcome to, forward the recording to them, or I can send you the sign up link if they want to watch it. Otherwise, feel free to get in touch with me via email. Hope this was helpful, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening. And Patty, yes, the activities in first and second are different. Yes. Ben says, any advice for a student teacher? Be like a sponge, absorb everything, but then when it's your time to, do your own thing, take the good and the bad and just learn from it all, and also observe in other classrooms other than your cooperating teacher's classroom, because that is super helpful. All right, everybody, thanks so much for being here. Look for that email from me and let me know tomorrow if you don't see it. Thank you so much, and I will talk to you soon.